I have spent years reading the confessions of men who tried to split themselves in two, and I have come to believe that the most terrifying door in all of literature is not the one that opens onto hell, but the one that opens onto the room where you already live. We all carry a Hyde within us, not evil, not monstrous, but simply the version of ourselves we have locked away because society demanded we be one thing, and one thing only. Robert Louis Stevenson wrote this story in a fever dream. Literally. In September 1885, he woke from a nightmare to his wife Fanny's screams. He had been thrashing in his sleep, crying out about a man who could transform into a monster. He wrote the first draft in 3 days, a feverish outpouring of Gothic terror, and read it aloud to Fanny. She called it too allegorical, too obvious in its moralizing. Stevenson, wounded, threw the entire manuscript into the fire and began again. 3 days later, he had the novella we know today. Published in January 1886, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde sold 40,000 copies in 6 months. Queen Victoria herself requested a copy. But the book's true origin lies not in a nightmare but in the streets of Edinburgh, where Stevenson grew up watching the respectable gentlemen of the city walk past the brothels and taverns with their eyes fixed straight ahead. His city was built on a dual foundation, the elegant new town above, the squalid old town below, connected by hidden closes and underground vaults where anything could happen. Stevenson had another ghost haunting him, Deacon Brodie, a respected Edinburgh councilman by day and a burglar by night, who was hanged in 1788 for stealing from the very homes he helped design. Stevenson owned a cabinet that Brodie himself had crafted, a piece of furniture made by a man who lived 2 lives. I think about that cabinet when I read the novella, how the wood remembers the hands that shaped it, how the story of Jekyll and Hyde was already carved into the furniture of Stevenson's childhood. I keep coming back to one moment in the text that most readers miss. When Jekyll first drinks the potion, he describes the sensation not as becoming evil, but as becoming younger, lighter, happier in body. Hyde is not a demon unleashed, he is a weight lifted. This is the great misunderstanding of the novella. Jekyll does not create Hyde to be evil, he creates him to be free. The potion does not transform Jekyll, it releases what was already there. The horror of the story is not that Jekyll becomes a monster, but that he enjoys becoming one. The door at the back of Jekyll's house, the one Hyde uses to enter and exit, is the key symbol of the entire work. It is a door that faces a blind alley, a door that exists to be unseen, a door that opens onto the respectable laboratory but is itself anything but respectable. Every Victorian gentleman had such a door. Every city had such alleys. The novella asks us, what do your back doors look like? What enters and exits through them while you sleep? The laboratory itself was once a dissection theater, and I find this detail devastating. Jekyll works in a room where bodies were once cut open to reveal their secrets, and now he cuts open his own soul. The mirror in that room, the one where Jekyll first sees Hyde's face, is the true center of the story. He looks into it and sees a younger, more wicked version of himself, and he feels not revulsion but a leap of welcome. This is the moment I return to in the dark hours, the recognition that we might greet our worst selves with relief. The involuntary transformations terrify me more than any monster. Jekyll loses control. He becomes Hyde without drinking the potion, in his sleep, in the middle of a conversation, while sitting in a park. The self he tried to contain becomes the self that contains him. I read this as Stevenson's deepest insight: you cannot partition your soul. The wall you build between your respectable self and your hidden self will eventually crumble, and you will not know which side you are standing on when it falls. #Dark themes. Victorian repression is the engine of this story, but I want to be precise about what that means. It is not merely that Victorians suppressed their sexuality or their violence, it is that they built an entire social system on the performance of virtue. The gentleman was not a man who was good, he was a man who appeared good. Jekyll takes this performance to its logical extreme, he creates a separate body for everything he cannot admit to wanting. I see addiction in every page of this novella. Jekyll describes the potion as having a singularly strong taste that he comes to crave. He speaks of Hyde's pleasures as undignified but irresistible. He knows he should stop, but he cannot. The language of addiction is unmistakable: the initial control, the gradual loss of agency, the shame, the promises to quit, the inevitable relapse. Stevenson wrote this before the word addiction had its modern medical meaning, but he understood its shape perfectly. Class and respectability form the prison walls of this story. Hyde is not just evil, he is low. He is described as dwarfish, deformed, ape-like. The horror for Victorian readers was not just that a gentleman could become a murderer, but that he could become common. The body itself degenerates, evolving backward into something primitive. This is Darwinian terror, the fear that civilization is only a thin skin over something ancient and hungry. Science without ethics haunts the laboratory. Jekyll is a doctor, a man of science, but he conducts his experiments in complete moral isolation. He has no colleague, no oversight, no one to say, stop. The novella was published the same year as the founding of the British Medical Association, and I think Stevenson was asking, what happens when knowledge outpaces conscience? What happens when we can do something before we know whether we should? #legacy. Jekyll and Hyde entered the English language as a phrase for dual personality, but it has become something stranger. We use it to describe politicians who preach family values while visiting prostitutes, celebrities who champion sobriety while drinking in secret, neighbors who seem kind but are later discovered to have hidden rooms. The phrase has become a cultural shorthand for the gap between public virtue and private vice. There have been over 120 film adaptations, but the stage play of 1887 is the one that haunts me. Richard Mansfield played Hyde so convincingly that when Jack the Ripper began his murders in 1888, Mansfield was actually investigated as a suspect. The audience fainted during performances. They screamed. They fled the theater. This is the power of the story. It made people believe that an actor could become the monster, that the line between performance and reality could dissolve. I think this 60-page novella has outlasted Stevenson's longer works because it is not really a story, it is a confession. Every reader recognizes the shape of their own divided self in Jekyll's laboratory. We have all stood before that mirror. We have all felt that leap of welcome. #lessons. What Jekyll and Hyde teaches us is not that we should suppress our darkness, but that we cannot. Jekyll's fatal error was not his desire to be free, it was his belief that he could separate his freedom from his responsibility. He wanted to be both men without consequence. He wanted to sin without guilt, to indulge without shame, to be the beast without losing the respect of the drawing room. The most terrifying idea in this book is that Jekyll did not fail because he was too weak. He failed because he was too honest. He knew exactly what he wanted, and he built a door to get it. The rest of us simply build smaller doors, quieter doors, doors we tell ourselves we will never use. I read this novella every year, usually in winter, usually by candlelight, and every year I find something new in the mirror. This year, I found this: Jekyll's tragedy is not that he became Hyde. It is that he could not become whole. He could not integrate his desires with his decency, his hunger with his humanity. He tried to cut himself in half, and both halves died. The door is still there. It is always there. The question is not whether you will open it, the question is whether you will recognize what comes through it as your own face.